everyone, and welcome back to just another F1 podcast here on the Apex Motorsport. This is episode 2, and today we have a new voice on the channel. Joining me for this one is accredited Formula 1 photographer Craig Evans. Craig, thank you for joining me for this one. We have a lot to discuss today, but before we get into that, let the listeners back home know a little bit about you and your involvement in Formula 1.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you for having me on, of course. So basically, I've been lucky enough to attend 3 Formula 1 events as an accredited photographer. It started back in Silverstone last year. I did Silverstone and Belgium in the 2019 season, and then I was lucky enough to go out to the testing this year before it all went a bit higgledy-piggledy and all got a bit muddled up with the COVID situation. I started out just taking my camera to the pre-season testing in Barcelona, snapping away, put my work on Instagram and got picked up by certain channels, and they said, do you want us to offer you accreditation? I was like, yes, please. And then it kind of just built on it from there, and I'm looking forward to getting back to a track and snapping away some more as the cars go around.
Now I'm going to spring a little surprise on you and play a little game of F1 higher or lower, or at least some form of it anyway. The rules are simple. I'm going to give you a stat and a driver, and you have to tell me if the second driver I give you has done better or worse than the driver before. There's a certain connection with a certain world champion this week. At the Grand Prix in Imola, Lewis Hamilton broke the record for most race wins, but Nigel Mansell managed to win 32 Grand Prix. But has Fernando Alonso won more or less Grand Prix than Nigel Mansell?
I'd say Alonso's probably won more.
Okay.
I think.
Is that your final answer?
Yeah, I'll go with more.
That is correct. Fernando Alonso has won 32, where Nigel Mansell's won 31. Although Mansell has a better win percentage, with 16.23% out of his 191 races, compared to Alonso's 10.19% out of 314 races, with at least 23 more races to come next season. Okay, you ready for the next one?
Go for it, fire away.
Another record Lewis Hamilton holds is for the most wins in a debut season. He's tied in 4 wins with Jacques Villeneuve. Juan Manuel Fangio won a total of 3 races in his debut season, but has Jackie Stewart won more or less races in his debut season?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm probably going to go with less. I'm going to go with less.
Final answer?
Yeah, final answer.
That is correct.
Hey!
Jackie Stewart has only won 1 race in his debut season. That was the 1965 Italian Grand Prix, where Juan Manuel Fangio won 3 in the 1950 Monaco Grand Prix, also winning in Belgium and France. Final question. You ready for this one?
Final one. Let's have it.
Okay. Michael Schumacher has won a total of 77 fastest lap awards, but has Lewis Hamilton won more or less?
I'm going to go with less, because usually Hamilton's not usually the one that gets the fastest lap.
Okay, final answer?
Yeah, I'll go with less.
You got the full house, 3-3.
Yes.
Michael Schumacher has won 77 fastest lap awards, as I said, but Lewis Hamilton has only won 53.
Oh,
he might catch up with him though. He hopefully might have a few more seasons on him.
He's got the time.
Now we'll move on to the Turkish Grand Prix. That was the last race in the Formula 1 calendar. Lewis Hamilton obviously crossed the line, first place. Sergio Perez, the Racing Point, second. Don't really think we expected that. And then Sebastian Vettel back on the podium in third. But that was Sunday. Let's go back to Saturday and to qualifying, and a certain Canadian on pole position for the first time. What's your thoughts on Lance Stroll become the first Canadian since Jacques Villeneuve at the 1997 European Grand Prix in RF to be in pole position?
Well, I think throughout the whole session I was kind of watching Perez, thinking Perez could have this here. Perez could be on for his first pole position. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Lance Stroll just pops up and puts in a lap that's nearly 4/10 quicker than everyone else. It was very similar to his run in Monza in 2017, where he managed to drag the Williams to 4th on the grid for qualifying, and that again was a very wet session. So I think Stroll's found his niche there. In when it's super wet, he just seems to find that extra bit of grip that the other drivers might struggle. might struggle to find in the wet. But yeah, no, he's had a poor run of form up to Turkey, and I think that pole position was a well-needed pat on the back, because I think, what was it, in Mugello, he crashed out on the opening lap in that carnage-filled race at Ferrari's home track. He then also crashed out in Sochi. He had a bit of a tangle with Charles Leclerc. And then he missed the Nürburgring due to a rather strange COVID test situation. And then crashed with Verstappen and Norris with pretty much mirror incidents at Turn 1 in Portimao. So he's not had the best run of form going into Turkey. But for him to put it on pole, that was a statement. That was for someone that's getting quite a bit of stick. So it was nice to see him put it on pole and lift his confidence a lot.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. About he's getting a lot of stick because of his dad's ownership of the team. I have to remember back, Formula 3, he dominated his final season where he won. Was it 100 points or more? It was
a lot of people seem to forget that he was dominant in the lower formulas.
And I do think his dad's involvement has sort of fast-tracked him into the sport a little bit, but
definitely,
I think he showed why he should be on the grid at the very least. There's a lot of debate whether he should be in the Racing Point or not, but Stroll obviously impressed, and so did his teammates Sergio Perez and Alex Albon. But Perez and Stroll, Pink Mercedes, as people have called them from the start of the season, they actually were performing better than the Silver Arrows Mercedes in qualifying. Do you think that was just a freak performance for Mercedes, or do you actually think on tracks like Turkey they genuinely are going to struggle going forward?
I think with the Mercedes, it's a matter of when the natural grip of the circuit is low. They always seem to struggle getting the tyres fired up. And obviously with the qualifying, I don't know whether that was because Mercedes set the car up for the race on the Sunday, and Racing Point may have geared the car towards the Saturday qualifying session. We'll see, but that was a bit of a surprise seeing the Mercedes that low down. But we saw them fight through, and not being funny, a stellar drive from Hamilton to cement that 7th World Championship. But no, it was nice to see the Racing Points up there. They've been developing all season. Obviously, the constructors' battle is looking mega tight with Renault and McLaren. So it'll be interesting to see if they can continue the form into the final 3 races of the season.
And in qualifying, it was Perez and Albon who got the second row of the grid locked out. 2 drivers don't have a seat for next season. Still, both of them are linked to that Red Bull seat, which Albon currently holds. Perez, we don't really know what's going on with him. Do you think there's any way Perez could take that seat off Alex Albon next season?
I could definitely see Red Bull going for someone like Sergio Perez. He's just a solid driver. He's proven that in his time in F1. But then this is the Red Bull Young Driver Program, and we don't know what Dr. Helmut Marko is going to do. He's very cut and shut with his young drivers, often not giving them the chance to show what they need to. But it'll be interesting to see whether Albon can keep the seat going into the next season, or whether it's going to go to someone like Sergio Perez or Nico Hülkenberg.
Yeah, and obviously Saturday was an exciting day for qualifying, but there was an incident in qualifying that I think scared and spooked a lot of Formula 1 fans, and it brought flashbacks to Suzuka 2014, where the late Jules Bianchi obviously crashed into a crane. The crane was left out on track. Michael Massey, the race director, thought it was going to be ending time. Don't think that should have happened. Did you see that and think, no, something's not right here?
Well, I think looking back on the incident, it's like you say, Michael Massey was told by the stewards at turn 8 that the crane would be gone by the time the cars would arrive there, and he thought that would be okay to just green flag the session and just go for it. And I can't understand the thought process behind that. Obviously, after that tragic incident in Suzuka back in 2014, which put Jules Bianchi in a coma, and then sadly he died 9 months later, I just can't think you can take that risk anymore. After the Bianchi incident, it was said cranes will have skirts on when they're on the side of the track, and it's something we've not seen. And obviously the drivers have been in unanimous disagreement with this as well, with Sebastian Vettel coming out and saying he's got zero tolerance for this. I mean, we were already running a delayed session. Where's the harm in delaying it an extra 5 minutes? I just think it was a risk that wasn't worth taking, because turn 8 is a high-speed corner, and if you slide off there, you're going to aquaplane, and you're going to hit the digger. If a car's ended up there once, it's going to happen again. I just think it was a risk that didn't need to be taken, and I think it's since the death of Charlie Whiting last year, I think the FIA has been missing that pin-sharp decision-making that he was renowned for. But Michael Massey said he thought it wouldn't have been a problem. And I think he's very lucky to get away with it, because we are very lucky we didn't have a severe accident again.
Yeah, I think the fact that he said he was more than comfortable racing the cars, it doesn't sit well with Formula 1 fans, new or old. I think, as you said, since the passing of Charlie Whiting, things have been very different, and it seems to be a lot more laid back, and that's not what we need for Formula 1. As much as they got a lot of criticism for penalising people doing overtakes or whatever, when it comes down to the actual safety of the drivers, whenever incidents have happened in the past, they do need to take that seriously, and they aren't doing that at the moment.
I think the FIA's biggest problem at the minute is the inconsistency. One race they're doing one thing and the next they're doing another, and it's just missing that sharpness that should be coming from a governing body, especially when you're sending drivers out on cars that can do nearly 200 miles an hour and hit a wall at something like 35G. You need that pin-sharp decision-making, and you need that continuity throughout the season to make sure stuff like this isn't happening, because it's super dangerous. And the idea of Formula 1 is we're trying to reduce those dangers. So we're trying to cut back on... they're trying to make the cars slower. They're trying to improve the safety with the halo, the hands device, and all of those measures. It's great taking them for the cars, but if we're not taking the security measures race weekend by race weekend, then what's the point? It's just you're minimising the risk, but still taking the risks, which could end up in serious accidents.
Moving on now to the actual Grand Prix on the Sunday. On the way to the grid, we've seen Antonio Giovinazzi and George Russell crash. It's flashbacks to Max Verstappen in Hungary. I don't think the mechanics had such a rush this time. Both were able to start from the race, although Russell started from the pits. Did you see that? And at any point did you think, this race can't go ahead?
Not being funny, the way the FIA have been in the past with wet starts, I'm amazed it wasn't a safety car start, because the one certainty with an F1 weekend is the full wets are very rarely used, because if it's too heavy for inters, quite often we see the session red flagged or safety card. So I think the fact it didn't start behind a safety car or wasn't delayed was, again, a strange decision, but I'm super chuffed it wasn't, because it was a fantastic race. Didn't see any red flags or any safety cars at all, which was surprising. But yeah, no, it was. I think it just shows you how difficult the Turkey surface was to drive on, considering it was resurfaced 10 days before the actual race. Pirelli didn't even know. The circuit organisers hadn't told Pirelli they'd resurfaced, which is why we saw these problems with the tyres. So it made for an interesting viewing. Let's definitely say that. I mean, the drivers definitely earned their money that weekend.
Yeah, I think a lot of Formula 1 fans were excited when the news broke they were going back to Turkey. I think if we all had a knew in advance that there would be a wet race and the tracks are resurfaced, we're all thinking, this is going to be quite interesting. It was, but the drivers, you said, they earned their money. Don't think any of the drivers really enjoyed that, apart from Lewis winning the title, but it would look difficult to drive on, and it was basically an ice rink. It brought like 2019 Germany vibes. They definitely earned their money, and when you're on about red flags, this season has seen quite a few red flags during races, something which I haven't seen quite often in my time watching Formula 1. I'm surprised as well that the race actually went ahead on time. I thought they would maybe leave it an hour to see the track dried up, but obviously they started surprised it was behind the safety car. It could have very easily been. I don't think it would have made the race as good, but there was no safety cars throughout the race.
No safety cars, no red flags,
which really surprised me. But on about people crashing to the grid, as I said, Max Verstappen back in Hungary. Him and his teammate Alex Albon struggled to get off the line. Something we've seen from Red Bull a few times this season. They got swallowed up by the pack. Do you think there's any reason why Red Bull is struggling with the start of the race?
I think the ironic thing with Red Bull's starts is it all seems to stem from when they were banging on about Mercedes cheating with their engine modes. So Red Bull were the advocates for getting rid of these engine modes that Mercedes were apparently running riot with and abusing during the race weekends. And I think where was the first race where they'd got rid of them? It was just after Spain, wasn't it, I believe?
Yes. Belgium?
Yes, Belgium, that was the one. And then all of a sudden, Red Bull's starts have gone from being right up there to struggling to get away and maintain position.
Yeah.
Which I found quite ironic, considering that the power mode ban looks to have hurt them more than anyone else.
Yeah.
But that seems to be the thing with Red Bull's starts this season. And not being funny, we saw it again in Mugello and in Portimao with slow getaways from both drivers of the Red Bull team. And I think it does come back to that power mode ban because maybe they were fiddling with the settings to deliver power in a different way. But it's definitely come back to bite them in the backside.
And moving from a team that always struggling with starts, a team that got a really good start was Racing Point. Perez and Stroll just going off into the distance. Don't think we kind of expected that. We thought maybe the pack would be right onto them, but Stroll was a couple of seconds in the lead at the start, and I think that just cemented again how good of a weekend he had to that point. It was very impressive. Do you think, were you watching the race and thinking, oh yeah, Racing Point can actually go on and win this now?
I'll admit, at the start I wasn't. I was expecting the pack to reel them in. But as the race went on and Stroll continued to open the gap on a drying track, I was thinking maybe he can go on to win this. Maybe they can go on and cement a 1-2. But I think the problem Racing Points had, the car was geared for the wet, and as soon as we saw that track starting to dry out, the Racing Points pace just started to fall away. And I think they'd maybe gone for higher tyre pressures at the start, which allowed them to build the pressure in the tyres, which then means you warm the tyres up faster, which is something that everyone had been struggling with for that weekend. And as the track starts to dry up, those higher tyre pressures means you have higher graining and you scrub the surface of the tyre a lot more. But as in the wet, Racing Points were untouchable. Stroll was fast, Perez was fast, and it's a shame to see them slip down the pack like the way they did.
And there was a reason why Stroll slipped away down. A lot of people thought it was another bad call by Racing Point, but after the race, Racing Point realised there was some front wing damage after Stroll's second pit stop. Do you think the team, if they had knew the damage was on the car, that they maybe would even gone to the point of retiring him if they didn't think it was safe? Or do you think that was the main reason he dropped down, or are they just sort of using it as an excuse that he didn't have the pace?
It was something that was confirmed by Racing Point's Twitter, I believe.
Yeah.
That Stroll had severe underfloor front wing damage. There was a bit of debris that had got wedged and broken part of the front wing off, which meant he was severely penalised on downforce, which is not what you want in a Formula One car at all. So that is a shame to see that race go from what could have been a win to, I think, a P9. So he only picked up 2 points when he could have got the whole accompaniment of 25, which was a shame to see.
So Lance Stroll technically doesn't have a seat next season. It's likely that he will stay with the Racing Point team. But based on his recent results, Stroll only has 2 points, where the super sub Nico Hulkenberg has 4 and Perez has 66. I asked using Twitter that Stroll technically doesn't have a seat for next season. If we ignore his dad's involvement, has he done enough to remain in Formula 1? 68% of you said yes, 32% said no. Greg, who do you agree with? Should he be in Formula 1 next season?
I think if you take the equation of his dad owning the team out, as you mentioned, I think the competition for seats this year is so insanely high. You've got Perez, who is having arguably the best season of his career. His best points haul was 101 back in 2016. He's already on 100 with 3 championship races to go. So he's definitely on course to beat that 101, unless we've just put a massive commentator's curse on him.
Not.
I certainly hope not. But I think Stroll has been so unlucky with the performance this year and where he's tripped up. I think that run of form in the mid-season from Mugello all the way through to the Nürburgring really hurt his confidence, as we mentioned earlier on. And I think it's going to be tough for a driver to come back from that. And I think because his dad owns the team, obviously he's going to be there when they transition to Aston Martin next year, partnering Sebastian Vettel. But I think this year, Perez has had such a blinding season. Hülkenberg's turned up and performed fantastically on less than 24 hours' notice. I think it's left Stroll in a bit of a sticky wicket, really, because he's caught between 2 fantastic drivers, and he just, well, if you're looking at the results, he hasn't performed. You're only as good as your last race result, and Stroll is struggling to get points. There's no way around it, and in this game, points do mean prizes. Perez is currently, is he 4th in the Drivers' Championship at the minute?
Yeah.
He's missed 2 races. He missed both events at Silverstone. And for Perez to be 4th at the minute, it's amazing that he's 4th in the championship, especially when you consider the likes around him of Leclerc, Norris, Sainz, Ricciardo. They've all been picking up podiums regularly. Perez has only got 1 this season, and that was the one from Turkey. And the way he's just constantly scoring points, he's constantly 4th, just tallied up his points, and he's having a blinder of a season. I think that's what's caught Stroll out.
Yeah, I've seen a stat of someone alongside Lewis Hamilton. He's the only driver to score points in every race that he's finished. He obviously missed them 2 races at Silverstone, and I think Nico Hülkenberg coming in, I think maybe knocked Lance Stroll's confidence, because Stroll had to then step up and be that real team leader, despite Hülkenberg having a lot more experience. You're not going to let your he isn't technically the reserve driver, but
reserve drivers are all over the place
yeah,
this season.
They meant to have Van Dorn and Gutierrez, and
yeah.
Gutierrez didn't even have a super license
Nope.
after the first weekend at Silverstone. But Hülkenberg's come in. They're not going to make him the number 1 driver. Don't think there is a number 1 driver at
The
Racing
thing
Point.
to remember with Hülkenberg at Silverstone, obviously he didn't start that first race through a technical issue.
Yep.
He was running 5th with 2-3 laps to go, and Racing Point miraculously decided to bring him in for a pit stop, which dropped him to 8th or 7th. And then that bumped Stroll up to 6th. So as it stood, Hülkenberg was on to outscore Stroll, and put a little bit of a hoo-ha on Lance Stroll. But as I said, Hülkenberg's performed fantastically, so you can't moan at that.
Yeah, and if you ignore the Turkey race, I think Hülkenberg was within touching distance of Vettel on the driver standings, and should have had to come in for another race. It could have possibly even overtaken Vettel, which would have been a very big story. Don't think it's going to happen now, given how well Vettel performed at Turkey. And as I said, he performed well. He got onto the podium. It was good to see him back on the podium. It's been a while. But he was joined alongside the man he's replacing next season, Sergio Perez. Alongside Lewis Hamilton, obviously, who won the race. There were only 3 drivers who raced there in 2011. But Craig, do you think this was the confidence boost that Sebastian Vettel needed? It might be a bit too late in the season, however.
Massively. I think Vettel has been seriously struggling with that SF1000 this year. And it's sad to see because Vettel is one of the pillars of the sport. He's a 4-time world champion, and you don't suddenly lose all that pace overnight. So something's going on at Ferrari. I'm not sure what, but something isn't quite right at Ferrari. For that car to be so off the pace like it was at the start of the season, and B, for Vettel just to be nowhere. He is one of the most consistent drivers on the grid. He's been there for years performing, and for some reason he just couldn't get the car fired up. And when you look at qualifying performance between Charles Leclerc and Sebastian Vettel, they look like they're in two different cars. Sometimes Vettel's 1.5 seconds off Leclerc. And take nothing away from Charles, he's a fantastic driver. But yeah, there is a bit. It's weird Ferrari this year, and it's ironic they get their best result of the season and come out of Turkey being the team that scored the most amount of points when their team boss Mattia Binotto isn't at the circuit for the first race of the season. They come out with their arguably best result of the season. So that's a thinking point for people to mull over.
And the good news for Ferrari fans is he's also going to miss the next race in Bahrain. I do think if Ferrari have another fantastic result, they almost had a fantastic result last year with Charles Leclerc.
Robbed with an engine problem.
Yeah. If they manage to win the race or get one of the drivers on the podium again, I think Ferrari will need to ask a few questions. I done a video, an article for the Apex Motorsport a couple of months ago, looking at Ferrari and thinking about how they're more open to the media and there's a lot more engagement with Mattia Binotto, with Charles and Sebastian. I thought maybe this is getting the fans back on board and really the next sort of era for Ferrari, but it is in the wrong way. Something that Formula 1 fans have wanted for a long time is for teams to be a lot closer and more competitive, something that we will hope to see from 2022. But we're starting to see it a little bit this season, and I think sort of the downfall of Ferrari is helping that. At the Turkish Grand Prix, there was 5 different race leaders. Craig, do you think a wet track creates a more level playing field in Formula 1?
I would definitely agree with that, yes. You think back to the previous wet races we've had, and they've all been amazing, really. You think back, you had Brazil last year that was stop-start because of the weather. You had Turkey this year, which arguably I think has been the best race of the season so far. You have Germany last year as well. That was a blinder of a race. I just think currently these cars for the drivers are too easy to drive. And that's all right for me to say from my lowly position of shooting them with a camera from the side of the track. But the professionals like Martin Brundle and other drivers have come out and said the cars are easy to drive. And now you've got drivers doing hot lap videos from in the car. I just think when you take away these driver assists, which the rain kind of does, it levels the playing field. And that's fantastic to watch. That's a win-win for everyone, unless you're the team that's losing. But I think a level playing field is what F1 should strive to be. I'm not saying we should penalise Mercedes because I take nothing away from Mercedes. They have been dominant and they deserve every second of that dominance because they have been sublime in every single aspect of the sport. Where you've got Ferrari that tried to beat them and got done for apparently cheating, but we never found out the reports of that. Mercedes have just been out there, and I take nothing away from them. They're fantastic. They deserve what they've built. But as fans, we want to see fair racing. We want to see balanced racing where everyone on a Sunday, has a chance to go on to win. And I think Sunday was, I don't know if you agree with me on this, Richard, but Sunday was the first race in a long time we went into, and I sat down to watch it with my orange juice early in the morning, and I said, I have no idea who's going to win this. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I do. I think it helped that Mercedes weren't right up at the front. And you're thinking, I think we all sort of hoped, let's have a Racing Point car stand top step of the podium. And I think there have been a lot of fans that we've been going on thinking, right, let's hope Bottas can stay up there to keep the title fight alive. Obviously, Mercedes won in Imola to win the Constructors' Championship, their 7th in a row. They had a chance to win the Drivers' Championship with Lewis Hamilton at Turkey. Bottas needed to outscore him by 8 points. Bottas finished in 14th, so that obviously
a lap down.
A lap down, yeah. So that means Lewis Hamilton is a 7-time world champion, equal Michael Schumacher's record. He won the race. He started in 6th place, had a fantastic drive, as you've already said.
Definitely a champion's drive.
Yeah, but his teammate Valtteri Bottas, he doesn't seem to be able to handle the pressure when he's needing to do something, when there's a title on the line. All he done in Turkey was just spin the car around.
I think he spun 6 times overall
Something
in
like
Turkey. Yeah, Bottas is... It's an interesting one because it comes down to how you gauge success. And obviously you're going up against Lewis Hamilton, who is arguably the greatest the sport has ever seen. And he's in the same car, he's got the same tools, and he can't compete across a season. He's quick at certain tracks. Sochi is always a favourite of his, where he performs well. But he can't compete over the course of a season. And when Bottas has a bad weekend, he's not on the podium. He's a good 30 seconds behind Lewis. When Lewis has a bad weekend, he finishes second. It's a tough one for Bottas, and I think he is the right driver for that second Mercedes car because he's consistent, he brings home points, but he's not consistent in challenging Lewis because Lewis is that much faster. I think the race on Sunday showed to me that if you still think that Lewis Hamilton only wins these championships because he's in the best car, you're a bit of a fool. Because Bottas is in the same car and Bottas finished a lap down after spinning 6 times when he needed a win in the fastest lap. And Hamilton got the win, finished the lead lap, of course, with winning. And Lando Norris, last lap Lando, came up and nicked the fastest lap. But yeah, it was one of Bottas's worst weekends I can remember. I don't know about if you agree on that.
Yeah, I think everything that was on the line for him, for Lewis Hamilton to win the race, it was 30 odd seconds, just way out in the lead. As you said, it was a champion's drive, and I think one thing I've noticed with Valtteri Bottas is when the pressure's off, he performs well. Start of the season, where the pecking order of the car still is slightly unknown. We've seen the last 7 years, Mercedes have always been the team to come out and dominate the season. But Bottas always seems to start the season well, and then when it gets to the start of the European season, it just starts to unravel for him, if not before that. But Lewis Hamilton, fantastic drive. I agree with you what you said about Bottas being the right man for that second Mercedes car. Something that me and Ryan have discussed on the channel before is our predictions for the Mercedes seat for next season. We have always said it would be George Russell. We think he will be in that seat eventually. Although we've seen what happened with Esteban Ocon. Do you think there could be a repeat of that in the future?
I think Russell's definitely in that danger zone now of getting lost in the crowd. I mean, he's a fantastic young driver, but there was the rumour going around last season when Russell was maybe going to go up to the Mercedes for this year. Claire Williams obviously vetoed that and said, no, that's not happening. And then obviously Frank and Claire left Williams a couple of months later. So I imagine George is a bit... he's not feeling the best about that because he could have been in that Mercedes. And when we've seen him in that Mercedes, he's quick. We saw him at the young driver test in Hungary 2 years ago break the track record that was set by, I think, Sebastian Vettel that year, a time that Hamilton couldn't get anywhere near. So I'd love to see Russell in the Mercedes. I think he would definitely give Hamilton a run for his money. But it all comes down to what Mercedes want to do. Why upset a system that has worked so well and brought you 7 consecutive Constructors and Drivers' Championships? Obviously, Bottas hasn't been there for all 7. But since he's been there, that Mercedes usually wrap up the title with 3 or 4 races left in the season for the Constructors. So I can't see them changing that. Although Russell is a young driver with a lot of promise, I can't see that system changing at Mercedes unless Bottas just has enough of constantly being beaten by Hamilton, which has got to be quite a hard thing. Because if Hamilton wasn't in that Mercedes, Bottas would dominate. He's quick. He's very quick. But Hamilton is just that little bit quicker consistently. And I think that's the biggest difference when it comes to the two.
One thing I've always said about George Russell potentially stepping up to Mercedes is if there's any season to do it, it's next season, because the cars are being carried over for the large part anyway. Mercedes know how to build a car. They know everything about that car. So why not let Hamilton use his experience to help coach Russell? He doesn't really need much coaching, but always that experience head is helpful. And just see what happens. And because the regulations will be changing, Hamilton should still be dominating next season, and he should have enough, he should make enough points himself to be right up there. And then Russell, he's consistent. It might help Mercedes claim another title. I think if Mercedes claim the title next year, which we expect, they'll have to go down as one of the greatest teams in F1 history.
They're already making that statement as it is now. To beat the dominant Ferrari from the early 2000s was a record I did not expect to see go. Red Bull gave it a good run, but obviously couldn't maintain it into the 2016 season and 15 season. But Mercedes are up there, I think, arguably the best team the sport has ever seen at this point.
Yeah, and it's a team that's dominated from the start of the regulations to the end. We don't know what's going to happen in 2022. McLaren could come out of nowhere and start being the dominant team again. Mercedes could do what happened to Ferrari this season, fall away. But that was the Turkish Grand Prix. It was a very exciting race. Lewis Hamilton obviously winning his 7th world title. So some more news in Formula 1 is that Aston Martin will be providing the safety car for 11 races next season. They'll be sharing the duties with Mercedes, a team that is very close to Aston Martin already. We can maybe see closer links down the line there. Are you excited to see Aston Martin become a provider of safety cars for Formula 1?
Definitely. I think Aston Martin are one of the best sports car brands in the world, and I think they should be involved in more sport. Obviously, they've got the endurance scene and the GT scene pretty locked down, but it's nice to see them coming into F1 with obviously the team next year. Racing Point are going to morph into Aston Martin, and it'll be nice to see an Aston Martin safety car as well, because Mercedes have had a monopoly on the safety car for nearly 40 years now. Since the safety car was introduced, it's been a Mercedes. So to see an Aston Martin will be a nice surprise. Well, not surprise, but a nice change to see next season.
And we obviously got the news of the 2021 Formula 1 calendar. There was a lot of rumours that the Brazilian Grand Prix might move, but it is staying in Sao Paulo now. 23 races next season. It's going to be a lot of races. There's one race that still hasn't been quite decided, and that's the 25th of April.
The Vietnam slot.
Yeah. First of all, do you think we could ever see the Vietnam Grand Prix, well, I can't even say make a return, make a debut appearance in the calendar?
I think the Vietnam Grand Prix is in a very grey area at the minute, because the lead project CEO has been arrested for money laundering. So I think there's a very good chance we may never see a Vietnam Grand Prix, which is a shame, because the track's built, the track's there, it looks good. But yeah, it's currently an empty space on the calendar that I'm looking at right in front of me. and it'll be interesting to see who fills that gap.
What race would you like to see fill it?
I would love to see a dry Turkey or Portimao fill that gap, because both of them this year have been fantastic races, and I'd love to see the cars back there in drier conditions, preferably earlier on in the season and with more notice to the circuits. So Portimao or Turkey are my lead 2 guesses for that one.
Now, there's a couple of new races in the calendar. Well, one new race, and that is in Saudi Arabia. The Dutch Grand Prix in Zandvoort. Technically, a new race is returning. It was on the calendar the start of this season, and the revised calendar it wasn't. It is crazy to think alongside Vietnam, the only way drivers this season can race at Zandvoort in Vietnam is playing the Formula 1 game. What do you think of the calendar? Do you think it's going to be too many races for the drivers, and obviously the hundreds of thousands of staff that Formula 1 employ and the teams employ? Do you think it'll be too much for them for next season?
I think getting into 23 races is too many, because there's so many back-to-backs and there's so many triple headers that you've got to remember, these people that provide us with the sport we know and love have families, they have other lives outside of Formula 1. I think 23 races is excessive, but equally, I can't see the calendar next year being what we've got in front of us. I think it's promising, but obviously COVID's had its say this year, and I'm pretty sure COVID's going to have its say next year as well, because I'll be amazed if we get that calendar next year. The season we've had this year, I think, has been arguably one of the best seasons I've seen in a long time, track-wise, and considering back in March we didn't even know we were going to have a season. So I think hats off and a round of applause to Formula 1 for organising this year, but I'll be amazed if we get that full calendar next year.
Now, if you want to see the calendar in full, I have a video up on the Apex Motorsport YouTube channel, as well as an article on apexmotorsport.com. It's a shameless plug. I have to do it. If you're listening on YouTube, there will be a link in the description below. And if you're listening on any of the podcast platforms, which hopefully I'll be able to figure out and get it uploaded, if you head over to the YouTube channel, just search for Apex Motorsport and it should appear. But move on now to our next topic, which is testing. And it links into what our next race will be. Testing will be, well, it's most likely in Bahrain. We haven't had that officially confirmed.
That's the rumour going around at the minute. It's going to be 3 days in Bahrain.
The testing has, as you know, as being there, has been in Barcelona for the last few years. It'll be nice to see a different track, but teams are used to multiple days of testing over 2 weeks. They're only getting 3 days, and while the cars are carrying over, do you think this is long enough for the teams to test the new cars?
The biggest problem with combining a shortened testing regime and Bahrain, say on day one, you go out and you crash. You're not going to get parts out to that circuit in Bahrain for 2 to 3 days, at which point you've lost your testing. That's the beauty of Barcelona. It's every day in Barcelona, parts going to and from the factory on cars and vans and in the boots and that kind of thing. I think moving it to Bahrain, it makes sense because you're out of the way in Bahrain. Logistically, part of me still can't see it happening. I'd hope it stays in Barcelona, or at least stay in Europe, whether it goes to Jerez or Le Castellet in France.
Don't put up there.
The what, sorry?
Is that no, it's Paul Ricard.
Yeah, Paul Ricard, yeah.
It wouldn't be good for photographs. There's an ice for that track.
I'm gonna disagree on that one because I love the stripes, the way you can capture it all. But either way, I think keeping it in Europe makes the most sense. Moving it to Bahrain and cutting it down to 3 days it's a double-edged sword, really. You think last year we had 8 days, this year we had 6, next year we're having 3 apparently. So that's going to have implications for certain teams.
Yeah, and one of them teams will be McLaren. Obviously moving to Mercedes engines next season. Something I think a lot of Formula One fans are looking forward to seeing. I think they're going to be the team that's going to struggle the most. Only 3 days. If an engine blows in the first day, Mercedes engines weren't great in testing this season. If that happens again next season, McLaren could really struggle to adapt.
McLaren have got to be very careful going into next year. With obviously you've got a new driver there. You've got Daniel Ricciardo who will don the papaya race suit, and you've got the Mercedes engines. And I think McLaren will have next year an extremely strong package. Their aero this year has been fantastic, and the Renault power unit has been brilliant as well. You add the Mercedes power to that, I think McLaren have got a race-winning setup next year.
Ooh.
I will lay down a gauntlet and say I would not be surprised if they did not win a race next year. But it needs to come good at testing, and we know testing and McLaren usually is a headache. But we'll have to wait and see on that one. And I think it's going to be super interesting to see Mercedes, McLaren back on the grid, and I reckon they're going to have a strong package for next year.
Making predictions on this channel usually doesn't go down too well. If you just want to look back their driver predictions video that me and Ryan done a couple of months ago, most of them are wrong.
Well.
Yeah.
You can have a stab in the dark.
Yeah, and we've also had people in the past saying that Max Verstappen will never be a world champion.
That I agree with.
Oh, another one we never thought. The comment section was quite funny in that one.
I can very much see Max Verstappen never being a world champion.
Ooh.
Let's just set the comment section alight.
Yes.
Moving swiftly on.
Yes, it will. Well, you found a new friend here. Well, chatting about Bahrain, that's, of course, our next 2 races. But for this podcast, we're just going to look at the next one. We might touch briefly on the oval, non-oval like track.
The oval that isn't actually an oval.
Yeah. Obviously, we know all our favourite Formula 2 driver, Roy Nissany, is going to be back in the Williams car. Yeah. In fairness to him, the last time he jumped in the Formula 1 car, he went back into Formula 2 and had a decent weekend. Formula 2 is here this weekend, but yeah, Roy Nissany, what's your thoughts on him? Do you ever think he'll be in that Williams car?
If we're going on results, I don't think so. I think, if anything... But then, I was going to say Jack Aitken deserves that car, but he's had a rotten season.
Yeah.
He picked up the double podium in Silverstone. And since then, he's really struck. The Campos has been well below what it should have been this year. But going back to Nissany, I think Nissany is very much a case of money talks. I take nothing away from him. He's obviously a good driver to get to that level. But I can't see him at the minute, with the performances he's put down, getting into that Williams and securing an F1 drive.
Yeah, I think a big problem with him is the legacy of his dad not being up there with one of the best drivers of all time, that's for sure. Another interesting thing about the Bahrain Grand Prix is Mercedes have now got nothing to play for. I always thought at the start of the season that if Hamilton had the title wrapped up and Mercedes had their title wrapped up early on, that Hamilton might just take a bit of a break and let someone like Russell step in. Don't think that's going to happen.
Oh no.
Yeah, I think contract issues there will bar that. But Mercedes have nothing to play for. Do you think that they'll just step the foot off the gas and just relax a bit more and enjoy these last few races?
Not at all. Mercedes don't get to where they've got by relaxing whenever they started developing next year's car months ago, before they'd even wrapped up the championships. I'd love to see them start at the back and fight their way through the field, because usually Bahrain provides an epic battlegrounds for the Mercedes drivers. You look back to 2014 with Nico Rosberg, but it's going to be an interesting one in Bahrain. It's a very power-heavy circuit, and I think Bahrain will be a thorn in the side of Ferrari. I would be amazed if anyone other than Mercedes won it, because usually it's a track that they are just their leagues in front at. But the thing to remember is the forecast is wet for this weekend, so that would be exceedingly interesting to see what happens if it does decide to bucket it down in the desert.
And obviously, with only a few races left, it means the battle for third is starting to heat up. I think it really helped with Ferrari's strong performance. Red Bull, I think, is going to be taking second, which will be nice for them, slowly climbing their way back up. But who do you think, come the checker flag at Abu Dhabi, will be that third place team?
That is an exceedingly tough question because you have 24 points covering 4 teams. Ferrari's strong result in Istanbul threw them back in for third. There's no other way around it. It really picked them up and brought them up the pecking order. I genuinely don't know. I think I would love to say McLaren because I've loved McLaren. I have done for years and I will continue to. But it's going to be incredibly close because one bad result from one driver in the remaining 3 races could mean the difference between third in the constructors and 6th, which is a lot of prize money difference, and it is an exceedingly close battle this year. And I, for one, am definitely looking forward to see how it all pans out in 3 races' time.
If we're making bold predictions today, I think I'm just going to say Ferrari are going to be that third place team.
Very bold.
But Bonato's
considering we're going into 2 power tracks the next 2 races.
Yeah, but Matteo Bonato's not going to be there, so you never know. You never know what's going to happen in Formula 1. Do you think, if we just touch very briefly on the oval, is not an oval track for the following weekend, do you think that's going to make much of a difference?
I have a funny feeling that the oval will be complete chaos because it's a 55-second lap. You're going to be lapping cars after about 10, 15 laps. It's a 77-lap race. It's going to be chaos. I tell you what, I would not want to be a strategist for that second Bahrain race because it is going to be a real head-scratcher. 55. We've not seen 55-second laps for years. I think the closest we get is Monaco, and that's a 1:08 now. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be super interesting to watch.
It's just going to be like real life Mario Kart.
Yes, yeah. Pretty much. Just less bananas and shells.
More predictions now. Who do you think's going to get pole position this week's Bahrain Grand Prix?
Pole position. I'm going to go with Bottas.
I'm thinking the exact same.
I'm going to pick Bottas because nothing's on the table anymore and he needs to come out and prove himself. And Bottas usually runs quite well around Bahrain.
Race winner?
Probably Lewis Hamilton if Bottas is on pole. It's a harsh thing to say, but the way the season's gone, I can see Lewis picking up a good. Because what is it? He's now won 11 out of 14 races. I can see him. Is it 11? Yeah, 11 out of 14 races with 3 to go. I can see him picking up another 2 or 3 wins. Easy. It's 10 out of 14, sorry. 10 out of 14.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. Lewis Hamilton with that one. Second and third, making up the podium.
If Bottas can stay with Lewis, I reckon Bottas is going to be up there. I reckon I wouldn't rule out the Renaults, especially Daniel Ricciardo, because you look at the low downforce tracks we've been to this year. Renault have been up there. Renault have been sublime the past few races. They've had really good results. I reckon you're going to be looking at, I think, for me personally, third. I don't want to say the usual Hamilton, Bottas, Verstappen podium. I'm going to go out there on a limb and say, I reckon Ricciardo or maybe one of the McLarens can get up onto the podium.
Yeah, I'm thinking Charles Leclerc for second, Carlos Sainz for third. Why not?
That's a very bold statement, that is.
It is.
That's a brave statement to make.
Yeah, but you might as well.
Be an interesting race, though, if it was to come true.
It would. And now, fastest lap, Lando Norris, I think, for me.
I'd agree with that.
And take it
Lando
on the last
Norris.
lap. And now, obviously, this is the big question. What position will Pierre Gasly finish in?
I would be amazed if Pierre isn't fourth. He finished fourth there last year. He's strong around Bahrain. The Alpha Tauri's a good car. There's no reason why he can't be. I'm going to say fourth. I'm going to lock fourth in.
I'm going to go seventh. I think someone will crash into him on about lap 13, and it had to get front point changed. I might as well make all these bold predictions while we're at it today.
And if it happens, we know there's a little bit of fixing going on
with
the podcast.
Yes. But yeah, I think that's going to wrap up today's podcast. Craig, thank you so much for joining me for this one.
Thank you very much for having me. I've thoroughly enjoyed having a good old ramble about F1.
Yes. If you do want to follow us on social media, you can. They're all linked in the description below if you're watching on YouTube. I'll also link Craig's stuff down there as well. Make sure you check out his website for his photography. It's fantastic. You can check out our website, apexmotorsport.com, also linked in the description below. If you're on one of our podcasts and platforms, just search up the Apex M Sport on Twitter, the Apex Motorsport on Instagram and Facebook, and you'll find us all there, and you'll find links to everything else. So as I said, that's going to bring this podcast to an end. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Goodbye.